Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about and answering a question from our audience. The question is, are there alternative methods or approaches to expressing dissatisfaction or seeking change during times of decline? And the first method or approach I would like to talk about here is voting. Voting, to a certain extent, does work. We see this with George Soros spent a lot of money on really local elections in order to pivot the country in a way that George Soros wanted. And so he managed to get a lot of his candidates elected to lower offices, and that actually made a huge difference. So if you vote strategically, you can actually make something of a difference, but there is still the Overton window that you have to consider, in which case only certain people run for office within that Overton window. Only certain people with certain beliefs run for office. And so your beliefs might not be represented whatsoever amongst any of the candidates you vote for. But voting is one way of expressing dissatisfaction and seeking change during this time of decline in America. Another thing worth considering in terms of an alternative method or approach to expressing dissatisfaction or seeking change during these times of decline in America is not voting. So we just talked about voting, but one form of expressing your dissatisfaction or seeking change is to simply not vote, because to a certain extent, every form of governance needs a certain sense of legitimacy. And if you don't give them that by voting, they really have two options. One is they just lose legitimacy. They recognize that a very small portion of the population is even bothering to vote. Or two, they have to rig the election and pretend like they have a ton of votes. And so I'm not going to comment on if I think that's already occurring or not. But by not voting and recognizing and noticing that other people are also not voting, you get to a point where even if they are adding votes to the ballot boxes, it won't matter, because everyone you know is not voting. And so you recognize that at least in your local community, the election is not particularly legitimate and most people are dissatisfied with the government. So not voting is a form of protesting, which leads us to our next way of expressing dissatisfaction and seeking change during the time of declines, and that is protesting. So you can protest. You can go out onto the streets and non-violently stand up for your rights. You can talk about the things that are making you dissatisfied with the current government, the changes you want. And sometimes that actually does work. We saw with Martin Luther King that he was able to very non-violently protest, and it led to a lot of changes, a lot of systemic changes within the United States. We saw with Gandhi, he was able to non-violently protest, and he was able to enact a lot of changes within India. We saw with Nelson Mandela later on in life, he was able to non-violently protest and lead to a lot of changes. So protesting as a non-violent tactic is very legitimate as a way of expressing your dissatisfaction. Another thing worth mentioning in order to express dissatisfaction or seek change during times of decline is just talking about things. Word of mouth is still one of the most important elements in regards to people hearing about problems, concerns that other people have. I mean, when you think about it, like if there's ever a local business that really does a bad job or treats you poorly, just word of mouth can really get that around extremely, extremely quickly. There's something called 6 or 7 degrees of separation. I've heard both terms be used. And so every person is connected to every other person based off of like 6 or 7 connections. And they've done this test where like they can get a letter all the way to the other side of the world, someone all the way to at the other side of the world through just like 6 or 7 people. And so there's actually a like funny meme about it. I think it's like 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon or something like that. Like you can send a letter to Kevin Bacon within 7 people. Because if you just talk about things, people know other people. And so if you want to express your dissatisfaction, you have specific complaints, just talking about that with others, just getting the information out there so other people can decide whether they also should be dissatisfied with things, is an extremely important way of showing your dissatisfaction, showing that you want change within your government. And sometimes it can lead to change. If a government recognizes that people are dissatisfied, then it could lead to change in some way, shape, or form. But typically, you'd have to combine multiple of these elements. So you might combine not voting with protesting and spreading the word about your dissatisfaction with the current government. And the combination of those tactics may be more persuasive than any one of these various tactics. And so the last method or approach to expressing dissatisfaction or seeking change during times of decline in America is moving. This could be moving within the country, and so moving closer to people who agree with you. You're seeing this both within states and between states. So people are moving out of the cities if they're dissatisfied with some of the policies around crime in the cities, or they're moving to cities if they're dissatisfied with the lack of crime in rural areas. Or they're moving across states. So you're seeing a lot of people leaving places like California and moving to places like Texas and Florida. And so people decide to stay or move depending on how satisfied or dissatisfied they are with parts of the state or federal government, or even local government in some instances. And so moving is a way of expressing dissatisfaction. It's a way of protesting against the government. It's a way of seeking change. We see this throughout the world, where if people are dissatisfied with their current government, they end up leaving for America and going on for higher education, stuff like that. And so the best and brightest across the world have, for decades, been going to America for education and typically been staying there as legal immigrants afterwards. So that's called the brain drain. That's been changing and reversing throughout really the past decade in particular, as America has been declining. But people protest with their feet. They move to different places, and that's why you'll commonly hear, if you don't like it here, then just leave. Well, I can tell you from personal experience, I'm an American citizen. I've lived in Pennsylvania, South Carolina, and Florida, and within the past year, I did move to the Philippines. So I protested and showed my dissatisfaction with the American government, American foreign policy, the direction of America. I protested with my feet by moving to another country. And I can tell you that it's been an excellent opportunity. If you are in a similar situation and you're very dissatisfied with America, I would definitely recommend moving to a place. If you understand Spanish, there's a lot of places in Latin America that have low cost of living areas, are very safe. The people are very kind. If you have an affinity for East Asian or Asian cultures in general, there are places like Thailand, places like Vietnam, that are heavily industrialized. They have a lot of job opportunities. If you're a remote worker, moving is even more easy. There's a lot of different remote work opportunities. I'm obviously a remote worker since I'm a full-time content creator now. In Philippines, if you are a Christian, then Philippines is. If you're a Christian and an English speaker, if you're a Christian and an English speaker, then I would recommend the Philippines, because they are a very Christian country and they do speak English here. And so I'm in the Philippines, and so there are various ways that you can protest through moving, either within states in the United States, between states in the United States, or just completely out of the country in general. I decided moving out of the country was the right choice for me, because I did want to talk about the criticisms, complaints I had of America's direction, and I thought it would be best if I did leave to make those complaints. And so, yeah, something to consider is, if none of these other options work, voting, not voting, protesting, talking about your problems, you can always move in one way, shape, or form. And there's a lot of now, especially after the pandemic, there's a lot of online work opportunities if you're interested in that type of thing. And the cost of living is far lower in a lot of these other areas as well. So if you like this video, please actually like it, give it a thumbs up. If you want to hear more content from me, please subscribe to our channel. We have a lot of content up in the queue. I've been making a ton of content. I absolutely love this. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you just want to be heard in some way, shape, or form, I do read all of the comments, and I would love to hear from you. So please leave me a comment. And thank you for listening to this video, watching this video today, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.